Welcome back. Today, we are not going to talk about history in the way your old, dusty textbooks did. We are going to put a classic political phenomenon on the operating table, a paradox that has existed for over 2,000 years and is still controlling the modern world, right at this very moment. It is a story of a rogue, a street-smart outcast, a middle-aged man who had nothing in his hands but recklessness, and a terrifying ability to understand human nature. His name was Liu Bang. But in this story, let's view him as the primal archetype of the master populist politicians you see on TV every single day. Let's strip away the myths right now. In the game of power, the most important thing is not talent. It is legitimacy. How can a low-level precinct officer, a petty bureaucrat who specialized in village errands, make intellectuals and brilliant generals bow their heads and obey? If we look at their resumes, Liu Bang had absolutely no chance against Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu came from the noble bloodline of the state of Xin, carrying the DNA of born rulers that Aura people often call old money or blue blood. This is where Liu Bang teaches us the first lesson of modern politics. When you don't have a beautiful resume, you manufacture a myth. Can you believe it? Liu Bang dared to spread a rumor that he sliced a giant white serpent in half to pave the way for his uprising. People whispered to each other that the serpent was the son of the White Emperor, and Liu Bang was the son of the Red Emperor. A story colored with divine fiction. But look closely. That wasn't simple superstition. That was a meticulously staged PR campaign. Applying this to the modern context, does this script look familiar? Look at the big tech giants, or the politicians currently on the campaign trail. They rarely talk about how rich their parents were, or how their path was paved with gold. Instead, they sell the public the story of the garage startup, the days of poverty, the story of dropping out to follow a passion, or the image of rolling up their sleeves to eat street food. That is the slaying the white serpent trick of the 21st century. Smart politicians today understand that the crowd does not vote for the most competent person. The crowd votes for the person who represents them, or the person chosen by destiny. When a presidential candidate or a newly appointed CEO talks about their humble origins, they are executing Liu Bang's maneuver perfectly. They whitewash a mediocre past and drape themselves in the cloak of destiny. They turn a lack of professional competence into a moral advantage, implying they do not belong to the detached elite, but rather, they are one of you. But the myth is just the opening act. To truly seize power, you need a platform. And this is where Liu Bang displayed a political genius far beyond Xiang Yu. And it is also a painful lesson for the technocratic managers of today. When he advanced into Guangzhong, the power center of the Qin Dynasty, what did Liu Bang do? The Qin Dynasty ruled by harsh, detailed, tight, but suffocating laws. Xian Yu represented military thinking, and I am discipline. But Liu Bang enacted the 3 articles of law. Just 3 simple rules. If you take a life, you pay with your life. If you injure someone, you compensate them. If you steal, you repay the debt. He abolished all the old, annoying regulations. Stop and think for a moment. Why was this move so dangerous, and yet so effective? In modern society, let's look at reality. On one side, you have the bespectacled professors, holding thick binders of documents, talking about taxes, processes, and 100-page plans. They are correct, but they are boring. These people are like the laws of Qin, or the discipline of Xiang Yu. Correct, but hard to swallow. On the other side are the masters of crowd psychology. They don't offer complex solutions. They offer slogans, catchy, short slogans that hit the immediate frustrations of the mass. Make the country great again, change, or simply drain the swamp. Liu Bang's 3 articles of law was the pinnacle of populist art. It tapped into the psychology of a society exhausted by complex governance. It gave the people a sense of liberation, even though in reality, 3 laws are not enough to run a nation long-term. But in the twilight of chaos, whoever simplifies the problem wins. Liu Bang realized a ruthless truth that you should never teach the crowd about complex processes. Just sell them a beautiful dream. And that is enough. Liu Bang understood that to win the hearts of the world, do not argue logic, commit to emotion. Wherever Xiang Yu went, he destroyed, burning the palaces of Shenyang fires that raged for 3 months and mercilessly ending the lives of tens of thousands of prisoners. Xiang Yu behaved like a superior conqueror, looking down on the commoners. Wherever Liu Bang went, he forbade soldiers from looting, took only enough food to survive, and even apologized for the disturbance. This is the art of emotional manipulation at the highest level. In current media crises, you see this script repeated constantly. A company causes an environmental disaster. The technical director hides behind dry numbers and protocols. The result? Public outrage. Conversely, a leader carrying Liu Bang's gene will do what? They will appear with a haggard face, bow their head in sincere apology, promise compensation even if they don't know how to compensate yet, use the most common language to touch the audience's hearts. They win not because they are right, but because they make the crowd feel respected. But behind that easygoing, benevolent face and those simple slogans lies a cold calculation. Simplifying the law wasn't because Liu Bang loved the people, but because he needed to buy time and support to consolidate his position. Creating the white serpent myth wasn't because he was superstitious, but because he needed a shield so that his talented generals wouldn't dare to rebel. And this brings us to the most cynical aspect of his rise. The coalition of the unwise. Xiang Yu, with his noble pride, sought purity. He only trusted those with clean backgrounds and good breeding. Liu Bang, he didn't care about purity. He cared about utility. He gathered the rejects of society and gave them a purpose. Fang Kuai was a dog butcher. Ping was a man notorious for scandal and bribery. Han Xin was a disgraced youth who had to crawl between a thug's legs. In the eyes of the elite, these were broken people, but Liu Bang saw them as weapons. He understood a dark principle of power. People with stained pasts are the most loyal, because they have nowhere else to go. While Xiang Yu was building a court of aristocrats, Liu Bang was building a gang of desperate survivors. This wasn't human resources. This was weaponizing the marginalized. Ending this setup phase, we see a transformed Liu Bang, from a village officer known for his love of wine. Thanks to storytelling and simplifying the message, he stepped onto the political stage as the only counterweight to Xiang Yu. However, politics is not just about speaking well. When facing the absolute military power of the enemy, empty words cannot save you. A sudden report shattered Liu Bang's dream of being the king of Guangzhou. Xiang Yu had breached the pass, leading 400,000 battle-hardened troops aggressively toward him. In his hands, Liu Bang had only 100,000 ragtag soldiers. The disparity was not just in numbers, it was in the quality of violence. Xiang Yu's rage was like a tsunami about to drown everything. Liu Bang was terrified. The image of the populist hero vanished instantly, leaving only a man trembling before the prospect of his own demise. The charisma was gone. The slogans were useless against heavy cavalry. He turned to Zhongliang, his face pale, and asked a desperate question that echoes through history for every underdog facing extinction. How do we survive this? The answer was humiliation. Absolute, strategic humiliation. Zhang Liang told him there was only one way. Go to Xiang Yu. Walk into the enemy camp. Kneel down and beg. This is where the story shifts from a battlefield to a boardroom negotiation, or what we now call back-channel diplomacy. Before the armies could clash, Liu Bang had to engage in the darkest art of politics, saving your own skin by selling your pride. He didn't just go empty-handed. He prepared the most lavish gifts, jade discs worth a kingdom's ransom. But more importantly, he prepared a script. He wasn't going there to fight. He was going there to play the role of a harmless, obedient He had to convince the strongest man in the world that he was nothing more than a bug, unworthy of being crushed. Now, we must walk with Liu Bang into that tent. We will witness the feast at Hungate, not as a dinner party, but as a high-stakes psychological thriller where every toast is a test, and every smile hides a dagger. When total ruin is staring you in the face, what will you do? Keep your integrity to die like a hero, or throw away your pride to survive like a beast waiting for its time? So, Liu Bang chose humiliation. He rode with only 100 men to Hongate, the camp of the enemy. Imagine the atmosphere. 400,000 soldiers of Xiang Yu were waiting, sharpening their blades. The air was thick with the smell of roasted meat and murder. This was not a diplomatic visit. This was a man walking into his own execution, hoping to talk his way out of the noose. In the history of power, the feast at Hongate is the ultimate case study of what modern political scientists call strategic humility. Before he even entered the tent, Liu Bang had already made the most important move of the game. He didn't target Xiang Yu directly. He targeted the people around him. He found Xiang Baho, the uncle of his enemy, a man who was conflicted and greedy. Liu Bang treated this uncle like a father, offered a marriage alliance between their families, and poured wine for him until the old man's heart softened. This is the first rule of survival when you are the underdog. You cannot fight the king, so you compromise the king's circle. In modern lobbying, we call this finding the back. Before a crucial vote in Congress or a hostile takeover in the boardroom, the real work isn't done in the public hearing. It happens in private clubs, on golf courses, where favors are traded and personal safety nets are woven. Liu Bang turned Xiang Biao from an enemy general into his personal defense attorney inside the courtroom. Then came the moment of truth. Liu Bang entered the tent. Xiang Yu sat there, facing east. The position of the emperor, his advisor, Fan Zeng, sat facing south. They looked down on Liu Bang. And what did Liu Bang do? He didn't argue. He didn't defend his rights. He knelt. He took the seat facing north. The seat of a servant. He said, "General, I never expected to enter the pass first. I was merely guarding the palace and the treasury, waiting for your arrival. I dared not take a single coin." This speech is a masterpiece of political lying. It is the art of self-deprecation. In the corporate world today, you see this performance when powerful CEOs are dragged before a government inquiry. Watch their body language. They hunch their shoulders. They speak softly. They claim ignorance. They apologize profusely for systemic errors while denying personal intent. They make themselves look small, harmless, and even a bit incompetent. Why? Because predators don't attack things that look like dead meat. By lowering his status to the dirt, Liu Bang deactivated Xiang Yu, esse combat instinct. Xiang Yu was a warrior. He wanted to crush a rival, not stomp on a worm. But the danger was not over. Fan Zeng, the advisor with the high IQ, saw through the act. He knew that a dragon pretending to be a worm is still a dragon. He signaled Xiang Yu 3 times to kill Liu Bang. He even ordered a sword dancer to perform, aiming to strike Liu Bang mid. The tension in that tent was suffocating. It was a silent assassination attempt happening in plain sight, masked by music and wine. This is where we see the difference between a solitary hero and a political leader. Liu Bang was physically weak, but he had a team. Fan Kuai, his bodyguard, the dog butcher we mentioned earlier, crashed the party. He charged into the tent, armed with a shield and sword, eyes wide with fury. He didn't kneel. He stood there, ate raw pork leg, and stared Xiang Yu down. Fan Kuai scolded the most powerful man in the world. He shouted that Liu Bang had conquered the capital but took nothing. Yet Xiang Yu listened to rumors and wanted to kill a meritorious brother. Xiang Yu, being a man who respected brute strength, was impressed. He didn't kill them, he hesitated. And in politics, hesitation is fatal. The climax of this survival masterclass is the escape. Liu Bang didn't wait for the dessert. He pretended he needed to use the restroom. He left his car, left his entourage, and ran. He rode a horse alone, taking a shortcut down a steep mountain path, leaving his colleagues behind to settle the bill and make excuses. Some might call this cowardice. A true gentleman would say goodbye. A hero would never sneak out through the back door of a toilet. But Liu Bang was not a gentleman. He was a survivor. He understood that when your life is on the line, protocol means nothing. Face means nothing. Survival is the only metric that matters. He left Zhang Liang behind to hand over the jade discs as a bribe and apologize. When Fan Zeng received the jade cups, he smashed them with his sword and cursed. He said, "Alas, this child is not worth planning with. Liu Bang has escaped, and one day we will all be his prisoners." Fan Zhenghua was right, but it was too late. Liu Bang returned to his camp, alive. He had lost his dignity. He had lost his claim to the capital. He was soon exiled to the remote, treacherous lands of Hanzhong, a place where people went to die and be forgotten. To the world, it looked like he had lost everything, but in reality, he had gained the most precious asset in politics: time. By accepting the humiliation at Hong Gate, by accepting the exile to Hanzhong, Liu Bang bought himself time to rebuild, to train, and to wait for Xiang Yu to make a mistake. He accepted the role of the victim, the obedient vassal. This lulled Xiang Yu into a false sense of security. The giant tiger went to sleep, thinking the rat was no longer a threat. And this leads us to the next phase of the political life cycle. Survival is just the baseline. Once you have survived the purge, once you have secured your safety in the shadows, you must start building a coalition to strike back. You cannot win alone. You need to buy loyalty. You need to turn the greed of others into your strength. In the next part, we will explore transactional politics. We will see how Liu Bang, a man who didn't own a single acre of land, managed to buy the loyalty of the greatest generals in the world by writing checks he couldn't cash yet. We will learn why a leader doesn't need to be loved. He just needs to be generous with things that don't belong to him. So, Liu Bang survived the dinner party from hell. He was exiled to the remote mountains, treated like a defeated dog. But as we established, he bought himself time, and now, the political life cycle shifts from survival to expansion. This brings us to the most cold-blooded lesson in the playbook. Politics is not a family gathering. It is a marketplace. Stop thinking leaders are nice people. Forget charisma. Forget morality. In a real Game of Thrones, a leader is simply a distributor of benefits. If you feed the wolves, they hunt for you. If you starve them, they eat you. Let's analyze the psychological difference between the two rivals through the lens of modern business equity. Xiang Yu was the classic founder trap. He was noble, emotional, and obsessively attached to his possessions. History tells us a fascinating detail. When Xiang Yu had to promote a general or give out a title, he would hold the official seal in his hands. He would hesitate. He would rub the seal until the corners were worn down because he physically couldn't bear to part with power. He wanted to own 100% of the company. He saw his generals as employees who should work for honor, not for equity. Liu Bang was different. He didn't care about owning the title. He cared about controlling the outcome. He operated like a ruthless venture capitalist. He understood that owning 50% of a massive empire is infinitely more valuable than owning 100% of a graveyard. The war between Xiatu and Han dragged on for years. It was a bloody stalemate. The turning point came not on the battlefield, but in a moment of pure, transactional genius. Liu Bang was surrounded. He desperately needed his top generals, Han Xin and Peng Yu, to bring their independent armies to the final battle, but they didn't move. They sat on the sidelines, watching their boss get beaten. Why? Because they were mercenaries at heart. They were waiting for an offer. Liu Bang was furious. He cursed them as traitors. But Zhong Liang, his advisor, slapped him with reality. He said, "You are fighting for the world, but these men are fighting for a paycheck. You haven't paid them yet." So, what did Liu Bang do? He didn't appeal to their patriotism. He didn't give a motivational speech about loyalty. He took out a map. He pointed to the vast lands east of the mountain land that he didn't even fully control yet. He said, "If we win, all of this belongs to them." He signed the contract. He effectively issued stock options to his executive team. This is the cold logic of transactional politics. Xiang Yu lost because he was stingy. He wanted to keep the rewards for his own family. Liu Bang won because he was willing to dilute his shares. Han Xin and Peng Yu saw the profit potential, and immediately they moved their armies. They crushed Xiang Yu not for the love of Liu Bang, but for the love of their own future kingdoms. But if giving away land shows Liu Bang's detachment from material assets, the next event shows his terrifying detachment from human emotion. During the stalemate, Xiang Yu captured Liu Bang's father in a desperate attempt to force a surrender. Xiang Yu placed the old man on a high chopping block, overlooking the gorge where the armies faced each other. He shouted to Liu Bang, "Surrender now, or I will cook your father alive." This is a moral checkmate. Any normal human being would crumble. Hitting the family is the nuclear option. It triggers the deepest biological instinct to protect one's blood. But Liu Bang didn't crumble. He didn't cry. He looked up at the scene, laughed, and shouted back a sentence that chilled the spine of history. "We were sworn brothers once. That means, my father is your father. So if you decide to cook our father, don't forget to send me a bowl of soup." This wasn't just madness. It was a cold calculation to make the hostage worthless. You cannot blackmail a man who has no heart. Xiang Yu was stunned. He was a nobleman who believed in codes of honor and filial piety. He couldn't process this level of pragmatic cruelty. By showing that he viewed his own father as an expendable asset, Liu Bang neutralized Xiang Yu's only leverage. Xiang Yu didn't kill the father, not out of mercy, but because he realized that emotional threats do not work on a creature of pure utility. This teaches us a dark truth about high-level leadership. To sit on the throne, you must detach yourself from personal emotions. You must view everything, even your own blood, as assets or liabilities. On a balance sheet, we see this today in the ruthless world of corporate restructuring. When a takeover happens, the winning CEO cuts old friends and loyal departments without a hint of sentimentality. They operate on the logic of the soup. If it doesn't serve the objective, it is irrelevant. With his emotions surgically removed, and his coalition of greedy generals activated, Liu Bang cornered Xiang Yu at Gexia. And here, he delivered the final blow. Not with swords, but with sound. Liu Bang's army surrounded Xiang Yu's camp. In the dead of night, they didn't attack. Instead, they started singing. They sang the folk songs of the state of Skichu, Xiang Yu's homeland. Imagine the scene. Xiang Yu's soldiers, tired, hungry, and far from home, suddenly heard the melodies of their childhood echoing from the enemy lines. It broke at them. They thought, has Liu Bang already conquered our homeland? Are our families already captured? This is the ancient version of narrative warfare. Shang Yu was a master of physical combat, but he was defenseless against psychological operations. The songs destroyed the morale of his army faster than any arrow could. His soldiers dropped their weapons and deserted in the dark. Shang Yu, the invincible warrior, sat in his tent, listening to the songs of his doom, and realized he had lost the hearts of his people. Liu Bang stood victorious. He was now the emperor. The street outcasts had climbed to the highest peak under heaven. But here is the catch. The coalition that brought him to power was built on a transaction. I fight for you. You give me land. Now that the war was over, the transaction was complete. The contract was fulfilled. The generals like Han Xin now possessed the massive kingdoms they were promised. They had their own armies. They had the same ambition that Liu Bang once had. A coalition built on greed is powerful when there is a common enemy to loot. But what happens when the enemy is gone? The wolves you fed are still hungry. And now, the only meat left on the table is you. The brilliance of the transactional politics phase is that it wins you the war. The tragedy is that it sets up the inevitable civil war. Liu Bang looked at his old friends, now kings of their own domains, and he didn't see comrades anymore. He saw competitors. He saw the next Xiang Yu rising from his own ranks. In the final part, we will descend into the paranoid winter of the patriarch. We will witness the purge. We will see why the phrase, "the birds are gone, the bow is hidden, the rabbits are dead, the dogs are cooked," is the only law that matters in the end. How do you fire the people who made you king without them killing you first? Peace is not the end of conflict. It is simply a change in the rules of engagement. When the dust settled at Gexia and Xiang Yu was dead, the atmosphere in the Han court shifted instantly. The external enemy was gone, and in the brutal calculus of power, when the external threat reaches 0, the internal threat rises to 100. Liu Bang sat on the dragon throne. He looked down at the court. He didn't see the brothers who had bled for him. He saw threats. He saw Han Xin, the military genius who could command millions. He saw Peng Yu, the guerrilla warfare master who controlled the supply line. These men were kings of their own domains. They had armies. They had money. And worst of all, they had talent. In a startup phase, talent is your greatest asset. In a corporate governance phase, excessive talent is a liability. It creates a power imbalance. This leads us to the final, and perhaps the most tragic, law of the political life cycle. The law of redundancy. Han Xin was naive. He believed that his merit would protect him. He thought that because he won the war for the emperor would be grateful forever. He didn't understand that gratitude is a burden that powerful men do not like to carry. Liu Bang began the operation. It wasn't a military strike. It was a slow, suffocating, legal process. First, he used a false report of treason to arrest Han Xin. He stripped him of his military command. He demoted him from a king to a mart. He moved him from his power base to the capital, effectively putting him under house arrest. Notice the technique. You don't kill a tiger when it is roaming the jungle. You lure it into a cage first. You strip away its claws one by one. Han Xin, sitting in his golden cage, uttered the most famous words in Chinese political history. The cunning rabbits are dead, so the hunting dogs are cooked. The high-flying birds are gone, so the good bow is hidden. The enemy empire is destroyed, so the generals must die. This is not just a lament. It is a structural reality. A hunting dog has only one purpose: to hunt. When there is nothing left to hunt, the dog becomes a mouth to feed and a potential danger to the owner. The skills that win a war are useless in peace. You don't need a wolf to guard the sheep. You need a shepherd. The aggressive wartime commanders are fired to make way for the bureaucrats and the compliance officers. But Liu Bang, ever the politician, concerned with his image, didn't want to pull the trigger himself. He wanted to be remembered as the benevolent emperor, not the betrayer of friends. Enter Empress Liu. She was Liu Bang's wife, and in many ways, she was the ruthless enforcer that allowed Liu Bang to keep his hands clean. While Liu Bang was away suppressing a minor rebellion, Empress Liu summoned Han Xin to the Chang'e Palace. She didn't give him a trial. She lured him in, unarmed, and in the dark shadows of the palace. Before he could even defend himself, the god of war was silenced forever. He didn't die on the battlefield. He died in a trap set by a woman he trusted. The death of Han Xin was the signal. A wave of purges swept through the empire. Peng Yu was executed, and his remains were preserved and sent in jars to every other vassal. It was a message written in flesh. The era of transaction was over. The stock options were cancelled. Why was this cruelty necessary? From a sentimental point of view, it was a betrayal. But from a systemic point of view, it was the only way to prevent a civil war. If Han Xin had lived, his power would have challenged Liu Bang's successor. The empire would have fractured back into warring states. By eliminating the heroes, Liu Bang ensured that the system could survive. He replaced the charismatic, dangerous generals with boring, obedient bureaucrats. He replaced the loose coalition of kings with a centralized hierarchy. To seal this new order, Liu Bang performed his final political act. He gathered his remaining loyalists and sacrificed a white horse. He performed the ancient blood oath ritual. It stated simply, if anyone not of the Liu family becomes a king, the whole world must unite to destroy him. This was the ultimate monopoly. It was a non-compete clause written in blood. It ensured that the board of directors would forever be controlled by one family. It ended the meritocracy that allowed a peasant like him to rise, and installed an aristocracy that would rule for 400 years. So, let us look back at the full journey of this man. He started as a nobody, a street hustler who understood that when you have nothing, you must sell a dream. He became a survivor who knew that when you are weak, you must kneel and buy time. He became a warlord who knew that to win, you must be willing to share the spoils and sell your own pride. And finally, he became a tyrant who knew that to rule, you must be willing to destroy the very people who built your throne. The story of Liu Bang is not just a history lesson. It is the source code of power. It tells us that politics is not a straight line of moral progress. It is the revolutionary becomes the dictator. The innovator becomes the underdog who fought the system becomes the system itself. Today, you might see a charismatic disruption in the tech industry, or a populist wave in an election. You cheer for them because they are slaying the white serpent. But watch closely. Watch how they act when the victory is secured. Watch how they treat their co-founders. Watch how they rewrite the laws once they are the ones holding the pen. The names change. The costumes change. But the logic of the hunting dog and the cooking pot remains eternal. Liu Bang died not long after the purge, exhausted and wounded, but the Han Dynasty he built became the foundation of Chinese identity. He proved that a man doesn't need to be good to be great. He just needs to understand the terrifying, beautiful, and ruthless mechanics of the human heart. The game never ends. It just waits for the next player to step up, claim they are the son of a god, and start the cycle all over again.